Science is a way of querying nature.
Right now, wars are being fought over oil. In a short matter of time, they will be fought over water.
An upheaval, a massive change is required.
Hey y'all, my name is Neil Sardana, and I'm here today with you with the Georgia Enviro Show. I'm your Enviro host for today. And I'm with the Georgia Beyond Coal campaign of the Sierra Club, and we have the pleasure today to be hosting the fourth episode, Confronting Georgia Power's Legacy of Toxic Coal Ash. The Enviro Show is a 6-part live stream series which aims to start conversations and highlight environmental issues in Georgia. The Enviro Show was conceived of and produced by the Dogwood Alliance and their partner organizations, which works to mobilize diverse voices to protect southern forests and communities from destructive industrial logging. As a network of activists, partnered organizations, thought leaders, and neighbors, we seek social, environmental, and racial justice. By joining forces and engaging in the fight to develop solutions together, we aim to solve crises faced by our communities, our state, and our planet. And so I have a really special guest for y'all with us. We have some amazing youth from Atlanta for the Planet who are going to be joining me for this exciting discussion on toxic coal ash in Georgia from Georgia Power. So I have with us Natasha, Lauren, and Angela, all from Atlanta for the Planet. They're students and youth who are engaged in climate action and justice across the Atlanta area. So I would like for y'all to introduce yourselves. Natasha, why don't you go first? And let's hear a little bit about Atlanta for the Planet and what y'all do.
Hi, I'm Natasha. And I'm one of the co-founders of Atlanta for the Planet, and we're basically a youth-led organization. We've now grown to work with youth from middle school to college age around Georgia, and we focus on all sorts of different climate justice issues, especially coal ash, like tonight, and we work with other organizations throughout Georgia, and Lauren and Angela are also part of our organization.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lauren. And I'm Angela. Yeah, and we're also from Atlanta for the Planet.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. So we have a really interesting, exciting conversation that we're going to have about coal ash. Basically, it's the nasty, toxic byproduct of burning coal, and in which we have millions of tons of this dirty pollutant stored across the state of Georgia. And so we're going to be talking about this and how it impacts us and what we can do to make sure it's not poisoning our water, our families, and our communities. So I'm going to have Natasha briefly, share with us kind of like the overview for our conversation today, and we'll get right into it.
Okay, so today basically we're gonna go from more general to specific. So just an overview of energy, and then we'll get more into coal ash, and then the problems that we've seen throughout the South, and then focusing on Georgia, especially in Juliet, Georgia. And then we're gonna go to ways how this is handled politically and how people like you can get involved. So to start off, we have this graph with the energy sources in Georgia. So as you can see, fossil fuels are by far the largest source of energy in Georgia, even now. And unfortunately, renewable sources are almost the very smallest sector. And so I'll explain more why that is such a small portion of our energy in the next slide. So in Georgia, our energy is controlled by Georgia Power because they have a monopoly on our energy. And that's because utility companies, like energy companies, are very large, and so they have very high startup costs, and so that means they're usually going to be monopolies. And the government in Georgia, the solution they had was to create the Public Service Commission, and they're supposed to regulate this monopoly. But if you dig more into this issue, you see that they're more interested in protecting the corporate interests of Georgia Power. So the reason that, solar energy is the cheapest and fastest growing method of energy production in Georgia. Georgia is known to be very hot and sunny, but Georgia Power still has a lot of excuses that they've come up to as to why the solar energy is not a big part of where they get energy from. And that some of those excuses are that they say it's less reliable, that they're waiting for the industry to develop better battery storage. But these excuses are mainly to cover up the simple fact that they just don't want to lose any profit. And that's because of stranded assets. So they've already invested so much into extraction, refining, and bringing us energy from these dirty fossil fuels that they would lose money by having to change the status quo, and that they're afraid of people going off the grid with solar energy. So even though they make up these excuses, solar power has many pros. That it's renewable. It doesn't create emissions like dirty fossil fuels do, which means that air pollution would help the air pollution situation, especially like in Atlanta, which is so bad. And then solar panels are constantly being innovated and becoming cheaper and more efficient. So if you can think of any more benefits of solar power in Georgia, maybe related to jobs, feel free to drop those in the chat. And now I will pass it on to Angela to talk a bit more about coal and coal ash.
Okay, hi guys, I'm Angela. I'm going to give you guys a brief summary and overview of the coal's life cycle. So the first issue we run into is in the very beginning of its birth. So coal, when it is extracted and burned, is extremely dangerous to air quality, as the burning process of coal releases toxic chemicals and greenhouse gases, which, as you know or might not know, leads into the whole, global warming and climate change crisis that is so prominent today. And the two main concerns is the two main greenhouse gases that are released from coal when it's being burned, which is carbon dioxide and methane, which are really two bad boys, not good for air quality at all. And so then the second problem leads into, when you're done with burning the coal, what do you do with the coal ash? So you have to, put it in a pit, which you can call, coal ash ponds. And the issue, which arises here in Georgia, is that most of our pits that we store the coal ash in is unlined. And this means that all these toxic chemicals that come from coal ash is going to leach into the groundwater. And this is such a big issue because when it's in the groundwater, it has the potential to infiltrate our main land bodies of water. And it can get into our drinking water because when you use wells to extract the water from the groundwater to use for agriculture and for drinking purposes, all those toxic chemicals that were in the leachate that came down from the unlined pits are going to be contaminating the water. And so that leads into the issue of what is coal ash. Coal ash is just the toxic residue left behind when you burn coal. And it has some immense issues because it can contain toxic chemicals such as arsenic, mercury, lead, just things that you do not want and that are very harmful to the human body. And so then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the visual representation of, how coal ash ponds have the leaching and into the groundwater, and you can even see the wells. So it's just a simple visualization, which will help understand the process of leaching.
So yeah, I was going to ask Angela, like, have you heard about these issues before, or like how did you hear about the issue of the toxicity of coal ash or the problems that we experience burning coal in our state?
So I actually learned about it in high school because in my school we had the awesome opportunity of having an AP Environmental Science class, and I took that my junior year of high school, and so my teacher made us, really understand the issues of coal ash, and we really focused on, coal ash in that one particular unit, and it was, really enlightening.
Great, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, if anyone else wants to just share about how they may have heard about coal ash or the toxic issue that comes from burning coal, please put it in the chat. And if anyone has any questions as we go, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll get to your questions as we go, and we'll have a Q&A at the end too to touch base on all of those questions. So what I want to touch base on is a major incident that occurred in North Carolina, and this is at the Dan River near Eden, North Carolina. And essentially in 2014, approximately 39,000 tons of coal ash and 27 million gallons of ash pond water were released into the Dan River. This is one of these major coal ash spills that occurred that's unfortunately very famous because it was extremely destructive. So this happened at the Dan River Steam Station. It was a retired coal power plant. So even coal plants that are not in operation, if they have coal ash stored on them, they still are a serious risk to people in their communities and their water supplies. So this happened in 2014. Thousands of tons of coal ash spilled into the water. All this millions of gallons of water were contaminated. And basically, it was a complete destruction of the habitat for many endangered species. It resulted in all sorts of the recreational areas having to be cleared out, and people are not even being able to go canoeing and hiking. All that got shut down, and because this coal ash was so massive and expansive, it even basically flooded out the river. And these pollutants were taken for miles and miles across the state and even beyond state lines. And so this is a major spill that occurred. And after this happened in North Carolina, the state basically decided we're going to either remove or contain all the coal ash into safe lined landfills. And unfortunately, some of it was even transported into Georgia for storage. So we ended up taking on all this excess coal ash from out of state because of this disaster. And largely that was because to store coal ash in Georgia, it was extremely cheap. It was cheaper to store coal ash than it was to actually just dump the garbage that like each of us produce in our homes. So that attracted a lot of coal ash from out of state. But North Carolina learned their lesson. They're like, we're experienced this major spill, this major disaster. We're going to contain all this stuff and we're going to put it in safe lined landfills. But unfortunately, here in Georgia, that has not been the same case. Our state has decided we're going to at least drain all these coal ash ponds so that it can prevent, major spills or leaks like what happened at the Dan River. But much of the plans for the coal ash in our state, over 50 million tons of coal ash across the state that are planned to be stored in unlined coal ash ponds by Georgia Power, and this will continue to allow the coal ash to leak into our waterways, into our groundwater, polluting polluting our communities and whatnot. And so this is actually happening as we speak, unfortunately, in Juliet outside of Plant Share. And Lauren's going to discuss a bit this situation happening in Juliet and how the community is being impacted by the coal ash from Plant Share.
So here in Juliet, Georgia Power-owned coal-fired power Plant Share, is leaving all of their coal ash in unlined pits. And like we've discussed, this allows toxic chemicals like arsenic, hexavalent chromium, and lead to leak into the groundwater, which the residents of Juliet are largely relying on for their personal drinking wells. And from this leachate, the residents have noticed higher cases of cancer, nosebleeds, and neurological disorders. And so this past year, 72 private drinking wells in Juliet were tested, and they contained toxic chemicals from the coal ash disposal sites. Now the residents have no safe or reliable drinking source and have to rely on pricey, unsustainable bottled waters. And Georgia Power is only monitoring the wells on their own property, not the residents, and they're not taking accountability or providing relief to these residents. And so on the next slide, looking at the picture, Plant Wansley in West Georgia, you can see Georgia Power's coal ash ponds are just insufficient. And these unlined pits expose residents to these dangerous chemicals that at its worst can lead to birth defects, cancer, and even death. And so coal ash water contamination is a serious issue, and people are being harmed from it. They'll continue to be harmed until Georgia Power stops contaminating water resources, and they take responsibility for their damages and keep their ash in lined pits, and then hopefully move from coal power entirely.
So now I'm going to talk a bit about some of the personal effects that this has had on people having to live through this situation in Juliet. So we have some quotes, and the first is from an article about the resistance of the residents of Juliet in the face of what was happening with Georgia Power. And so about 70 residents of the Monroe County Enclave came to the state capitol with Save Juliet t-shirts, bottles of discolored water, and a petition signed by 2,000 residents that they delivered to Governor Brian Kemp. They're demanding legislation that would require the coal ash to be stored in lined landfills as household trashes. And so this was a while back during legislative session, and we're going to get more into the bills that were passed or were not passed yet later. And then we also have a quote about just a person who has lived in Juliet and their view on this whole situation. So they explained it as, sitting quietly in the aquifer in Juliet, there are millions of tons of coal ash silently seeping who knows what into the groundwater. Multiple experts have now said this is real and that it needs to be excavated and put into a lined impoundment. We, the residents, have beseeched our representatives and government agencies who should be protecting us for help. Our plea seems to fall on deaf ears. So that just shows how hopeless these residents sometimes feel, not having access to something as simple as clean water, which we should all have. And now we have a bit more about the story. So a bit more of the backstory about Georgia Power coming to Joliet was that they promised jobs, pensions, benefits, but then when they came, they seized hundreds of acres in the town, and the situation with the coal ash caused all of the wells in town to eventually they were all found to be contaminated, and that took a while to get to that conclusion because Georgia Power was so adamant about not having third-party testing carried out on the wells in the local area. But locals finally were able to get that third-party testing and found out, and now they are forced to rely on bottled water. And many residents have also seen the effects through things like cancer. So it's a really terrible situation that's going on there, but the government has done little to help out. They have seemed to care a lot more about safeguarding the corporate interests of Georgia Power.
All right, and Natasha, I just want to ask you, have you or someone you know have been affected by similar issues like this, such as like water contamination, losing access to water, having to rely on bottled water? And folks on the chat or in the live video, please feel free to also answer this question. We can share some of your comments too, if you have the ability to. Yeah. So yeah, has this happened to you, or have you seen this occur in your lifetime?
I am fortunate to say it's never personally affected me, but like growing up, I never thought about that, and it kind of shocked me one day when I was talking to some of my friends about like plastic bottles, and I was wondering like why is it still such a big problem? Why do people still use them so often? And I didn't realize that even here in Atlanta, some people, some of my own friends, their parents, in order to look out for them, like they don't want them drinking tap water because in some parts of Metro Atlanta, the water could be contaminated. And I mean, even in my own area, how am I to know? Because around the corner, there's actually another Georgia Power plant with coal ash, Plant McDonough, I think. So I think it's definitely a widespread issue that we don't talk about enough. People like to just blame people for using water bottles, but some people don't have a choice. They need clean drinking water, and that's the only way they can get it. And it does put an unnecessary financial burden on people.
Yeah, definitely, and I think even now, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic, where water is so essential. It's I remember a few weeks ago there was a water main break and like Georgia Tech got flooded from this, and we couldn't use water in the city for a little while, and it just kind of made me realize how essential having clean, affordable, accessible water on a daily basis is. So yeah, like communities have to go through this every day and wonder if like the water they are having access to is poisoning them is absolutely would be nerve-wracking at the least, and during this time where we need water so much more, it would just be unthinkable to allow people's water to be poisoned and contaminated like this. So yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And I also want to go to so there has been some progress on some of these issues related to coal ash. Lauren's gonna walk us through a few of those and talk about some of the next things that are moving in relation to coal ash as well in our state.
Oh yeah. So, yay, there was a victory. Senate Bill 123 was passed in the 2020 legislative session that just ended, and that requires the full dump fee for storing toxic coal ash in Georgia. However, last year in 2019, Georgia Public Service Commissioners raised Georgia Power bills by including the cost of cleaning up coal ash contamination, and they put the rate back on the Georgia Power consumers. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and there's very little that has been done. But for the next steps, there is some good news. The Georgia EPD coal ash permit process, they are challenging the rate case coal ash decision in court. So hopefully that goes well. And then House Bill 93 would require public notification before draining coal ash ponds. And then another bill, House Bill 756 and Senate Bill 297 would require coal ash storage in lined pits. Let's hope that one gets passed. And then House Bill 1062, Senate Bill 384 prohibits coal ash landfills near Georgia Blackwater rivers. And so Blackwater rivers are slow-moving rivers moving through swamps and wetlands. And they're dark from vegetation decay, which is why they're called Blackwater. And it's very important that these are protected because the river is home to a lot of unique wildlife and biodiversity. And then moving on, House Bill 929 would require monitoring and reporting around coal ash pits for 30 years. So that could really help. All these bills have a promising future if these get passed.
Yeah, it was amazing to see during this legislative session the SB 123 get passed. That was the only coal ash bill of all of these that made it through, which shows apparently the public is able to challenge the solid waste industry, but when it comes to challenging Georgia Power, which a lot of the other bills were kind of more putting restrictions and on Georgia Power, virtually all of those were not able to pass. So it is, even though they have not been won this year, we are hoping that we can bring these back and make some progress on these issues. And yeah, when it comes to the rate case and the Public Service Commission, they have really just been completely ignoring the interests and needs of working families in Georgia. So we're going to be we're basically going to be challenging their rate increases due to the having them force us to pay for cleaning up coal ash. There's about, I think, 5 million tons of coal ash per person in this state. So I mean, they're trying to claim it's our responsibility, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. So, but in the meantime, we're going to be focusing on the Georgia EPD coal ash permitting process, and this is really our main opportunity to really challenge Georgia Power and our state in terms of how they store coal ash and making sure that they store it in a safe way. And so you can see here's a map of all the coal ash sites that have permits up for review by the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. We commonly refer to that as Georgia EPD. So EPD basically takes a draft permit from Georgia Power, and it's basically a proposal for how coal ash will be stored on that site. So we have some here, like Plant, McIntosh, Kraft, McManus, Mitchell, Branch, and Arkwright that are they're going to excavate all the coal ash from the site, remove it, and then store it in a lined landfill. And that's what we want to see happen in this state. So all those sites that have white circles, those are the ones that we are using and are appreciating that they're taking the full step to contain that coal ash properly. And then the rest of them, some of them are partially going to be removing the coal ash, but they're going to be some of that coal ash is going to be left in place. And any of the coal ash that's left in place, as we mentioned earlier, anytime it rains, the groundwater levels can rise, and then toxins that are in the coal ash, it's almost like the coal ash is being steeped in the water and then drawn back into the groundwater and then leaking into our rivers, contaminating our water supply, contaminating the waterways of our state. So any of these sites that have either partial or full black circles are the ones that we're really wanting to speak out against, because they're basically doing almost nothing to prevent those toxic chemicals from harming us. So this process is going to be going on now. It has already started. You can see on the right here, this is the schedule for Georgia EPD to be releasing those draft coal ash permits, and it's the timeline for the ones that are to be excavated and removed and put in liners. So these are the ones on the right that we're happy to see the way they're doing. There's still some that we may have a few issues with, but for the most part, they are doing it the better way by putting them in lined landfills. The ones on the left, these are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. These are the close in place permits that are going to be allowing coal ash to be stored in capped but unlined pits on the sites of these coal plants. And so let's not forget, just because a coal plant has been retired, it doesn't mean there's still impacts from burning that coal that have this huge impact upon us. And all these coal ash contaminants and pollutants and toxic chemicals are still putting us at risk. So we saw recently the Plant Hammond, Coal Ash Pond 1 and 2. They released the permits for those. We were able to comment on them and suggest ways that they can improve those. But you can see they delayed some of these coal ash permits. We should have seen the permit for Coal Ash Pond Plant Hammond, which is in Rome, Georgia, Ash Pond 3. We should have seen that permit this week. It looks like we're not going to see it until the week of September 14th, but they've been constantly revising these dates. But we at least want people in the communities to be prepared that as soon as these permits are released, it gives us the opportunity to make comments on them and to impact how they are stored. Plant Hammond here in Rome, Georgia, Plant McDonough in Smyrna, Plant Bowen in Cartersville, Plant Wansley near Carrollton, Plant Share near Juliet outside of Macon, Plant McDonough, again, and some other ash ponds, and then Plant Yates, which is near Noonan. These are the ones that we're going to be focusing on to make sure that they change these from cap in place, unlined coal pits, to transition to pushing for them to be put in all lined landfills so that they do not leak and poison our groundwater. So I just want to share with folks what the permit process looks like from Georgia EPD. So as I mentioned, we're focusing on the close in place permits, but what EPD has committed to is providing, we expect for them to provide a 60-day public comment period after each permit is released to the public, so that the public can provide input on their plans and advocate for them to make sure that this coal ash is stored safely and properly. And we expect also that they're going to hold at least one virtual public comment hearing for each of the permits during the 60-day comment period, but we think we may only get as little as 2 weeks notice before these hearings. So we want to make sure people in our state who are concerned about this issue, people in those communities who are directly impacted by this, that we get them prepared and have them aware of the schedule so that they can be ready to take action before these public comment hearings take place. And I really want to stress, this is our best opportunity to really impact whether or not Georgia is storing and containing its coal ash in the safe way by advocating for lined pits. this situation's been coming up for some time, and we really need people to take action. So we want to organize as many people as possible throughout the state, and particularly within those communities where these coal ash sites exist, to comment on these draft permits. And we're going to share a call to action for how folks can get involved and have an impact on this issue. So yeah, I'm going to kick it back to folks from Atlanta for the Planet to talk about how folks can get involved with their organization and stay up on this issue.
Okay, so we from Atlanta for the Planet really hope that you guys have enjoyed this so far, and that you guys have learned new things, or if you haven't learned new things, that you at least enjoyed it. So we are very active on our Instagram, but feel free to follow us on any of our social medias. We have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And on Instagram, we have 2 different accounts, Atlanta for the Planet and Georgia for the Planet. And I believe we might have a bit.ly. Yeah, there it is. I think that takes you to the newsletter site. Email list. Oh, the email list, yeah. So the email list, you don't have to worry if you don't like being spammed, because we really only communicate when it's very important. So don't have to worry about spam emails. And if you want to contact us, we have 2 Gmails, georgiafortheplanet@gmail.com and atlantafortheplanet@gmail.com. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. And yeah, just for folks who are interested in staying in touch with the Sierra Club Georgia chapter and the Georgia Beyond Coal campaign, yeah, we have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's @GA Beyond Coal. You can also go and sign up for our Sierra Club Georgia chapter pages at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GA Sierra Club. And also feel free, if anyone is interested in getting involved with this coal ash campaign and our Georgia Beyond Coal campaign as well. We're also running a campaign to try to challenge the utility shutoffs that have been allowed by the Public Service Commission too. So there's many issues happening at the same time. Folks are in crisis during this COVID-19 pandemic, and we need y'all's support. And to kind of like conclude our episode of the Enviro Show today, we have one big call to action for y'all. So we're basically asking folks to commit to raising their voices, to basically, once these public comments come out, we need as many Georgians across the state as possible calling on Georgia EPD and Georgia Power to make sure that they're storing all this toxic coal ash. Like, we have like over 50 million tons of this stuff that could be continuing to leak into our waterways if Georgia Power gets their way, and we can't accept that. That's going to continue to allow our communities to be poisoned for decades if that happens. So we've set up this site. People can go there. Please provide your information, and it'll give us a chance to stay in touch with you so that we can send you updates about what's going on with coal ash in Georgia, about all the permits, when they get released, when all the hearings are that Georgia EPD schedules, so that we can make sure as many people are able to come and comment. And also during that public comment period, we want people to be sending in letters, making phone calls, emails, signing petitions, and doing as much action as possible to make sure that our water in our state is kept clean and safe from being leached with all this toxic coal ash. So yeah, please go to bit.ly/cleanupga coal ash and sign up there to commit to making comments during this during the EPD permit process. So yeah, so that ends our discussion on, well, at least that ends our presentation. And so we're going to open it up for a discussion. We want to see if there's any questions in the chat. If anyone had any, if this sparked any comments or ideas, or we hope to answer as many questions as we possibly can for folks. So I'm seeing there's a question regarding Plant Vogel, which is not a coal plant, it's a nuclear power plant. says, with Plant Vogel's completion moving forward and much, if not all, cost overruns being imparted onto the Georgia ratepayer, causing our power bills to go up, how might the cost of buying bottled water on top of these rate hikes affect poor communities in Georgia? So that's a big question. Would any of y'all like to take a stab at that, or would you want me to do that?
I just wanted to also mention that question reminded me that on top of that, there's also the possibility of reduced income or other financial burdens because of COVID. So I think during these times and with issues like these, it really shows that the government's priorities are not, in terms of different people, they're not equally concerned with protecting different groups of people in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge point. I think, you know, COVID-19 is hit our communities in our state in such a way that we've never seen before. I believe I saw that we hit our highest level of unemployment on record during this crisis shortly after it hit, and the fact that, you know, we're in that situation and we're constantly having these costs incurred upon us by Georgia Power and the Georgia Public Service Commission, it's just absolutely, it could be crushing for folks. Like, we're seeing rent protections ending. I'm sorry, my dog's just really having a good time outside my door. But yeah, we're seeing rent protections being eliminated. We just saw the Public Service Commission eliminate their shutoff protections on July 15th. And at the same time, they're adding to our bills an increase in the charge, all these environmental containment costs from cleaning up coal ash being added to our bills. Plant Vogel charge has been added to our bills, and just a few days ago, they've now decided to add another charge to our bill for covering Georgia Power's COVID-19 costs. So, I mean, it seems like there's no limit to how much the Public Service Commission is willing to add to our bills during this time. And the folks who are struggling, people who may end up having to rely on bottled water, are going to just be stretched that much more thin. So I see there's another question. Why aren't these topics getting more coverage, like Flint, Michigan? Do y'all have any thoughts, or?
Yeah, I think it's largely to protect themselves. Like in Juliet, it was really hard to get private water testers just for the citizens themselves. Georgia Power did a lot that tried very much and is still trying to hide the issue and just not allow other private testers to come in and test the well water. So I just think it's not getting as much coverage because also just like media bias, and it's up to like the viewers and us and just to try and bring more awareness to the topic.
I think it's definitely not getting coverage because it's kind of pathetic when your government can't even provide you basic rights and utilities like fresh water. So it's probably not going to be mentioned because you want to keep up the facade that America is this, or that the United States is this amazing, great country.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other challenge is, I think a lot of folks have heard about the EPA, but they're not as familiar with Georgia's Environmental Protection Division. They're not as familiar with the Georgia Public Service Commission, the two main agencies that have a huge impact on our environment, on how energy is produced, on how people who utilize energy and rely on electricity and gas and whatnot, get their power. So I think it's, these entities that have such a huge influence, unfortunately, don't get as much coverage as, say, President Trump. And I do think during this pandemic, there's been so much happening, and we've had a huge racial justice uprising in our nation that has really changed the conversation. Not only that, but also has really impacted the environmental movement to look at like environmental justice and climate justice and take it much more seriously. So it is a bit hard, I think, right now, but this issue has been going on for years, well before the pandemic hit. And we saw over 13 sites, coal plant sites across the nation, were found to have been leaking toxins into the water. So yeah, certainly I think there could be more coverage, and I think it's on us to kind of hold Georgia Power, the Public Service Commission, Georgia EPD accountable, and make sure also that the media is engaged and on top of these issues, because as we're dealing with the pandemic and other crises, we have other people are struggling to get water, which we know is absolutely essential need during this time. So yeah, are there any other questions? Let's see. Yeah, I think there was a comment that the Georgia Public Service Commission and Georgia Power are trying to open up biomass plants, which is potentially going to make our climate situation in Georgia even worse. Producing 40 to 50% more CO2 than even per unit compared to coal. So I saw there was a recent headline about Georgia Power starting to bid out for the construction of these biomass plants, which they tout as a renewable source of energy, but we know that's absolutely not true. Burning trees is not a solution for climate change. If anything, it's just going to make the problem much worse. So. All right, so I think those are all the questions and comments for tonight. I want to thank you guys from Atlanta for the Planet. Y'all are always inspiring me with all the work y'all have done. Putting this presentation together has been, amazing to work with y'all. I want to appreciate Natasha, Lauren, and Angela for taking their time out tonight to be here to kind of explain coal ash to the world for us. I appreciate being in Alliance and working with y'all here in our state. I also would like to, thank all the viewers tonight for joining us here on the fourth episode of the Georgia Enviro Show. Thank you to the Dogwood Alliance. Thanks again to Atlanta for the Planet. I'm with the Georgia Beyond Coal campaign. I want to show support for some of my colleagues at the Sierra Club who helped also, put this presentation together. Thank you everyone, all the volunteers. We're just trying out this new stuff with the having to be online and socially distanced during this pandemic. So we're gonna keep on moving forward, keep on fighting for the people, and taking action as we sign off for tonight. I just want to remind folks to join us next week for episode 5 of the Georgia Show. It'll be streaming live next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. And I believe the host for next week will be the Georgia Forest Watch. Please check that out. It should be a pretty exciting presentation, and we'll see you then. Thanks again.